Welcome to the Power of Purity podcast, the show that empowers men to experience their sexual gift in a healthier way. Now here's your host, Tony Ingrassia.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Power of Purity podcast. I'm really glad that you can be with me today. And I pray that as we begin this episode today, that you're in a place where you just are enjoying and sensing the presence of God and the company of God in your life. And I pray that you have a sense of the fingerprints of God on your life. And I pray that you're in the place where you're just continuing to move forward on the pathway of purity that God has intended for your heart and your life. So praise be to God. And today I'm actually going to begin a new little series of episodes here that I'm calling The Deception of Sexual Sin. And just so that you're aware of it, I'm working on several different concepts that I'm excited about bringing to the podcast in the near future. I'm actually working on a series called 12 Things That Every Woman Should Know About Her Husband When It Comes to Sex, and a companion series of episodes called 12 Things That Every Man Should Know About His Wife When It Comes to Sex. That, along with several other things, exciting things coming up, and some exciting interviews that we're getting lined up. So I pray that you just stay with us as we move forward in the Power of Purity podcast, and there's going to be some really good things coming up. But for today, I'm actually beginning a new series of episodes that I'm entitling The Deception of Sexual Sin. And this is actually adapted from a session of the Power of Purity video conference. And I'm not exactly regurgitating that video conference episode exactly as it was recorded. I've actually sliced it and diced it and modified it. I think in the original presentation I had 8 or 9 principles, I'm not sure. And I've actually now got 13 principles that I'm going to share with you as we work our way through this episode that I'm calling The Deception of Sexual Sin. And if I had to put a thesis on the session, my thesis would be something like this: you will pay profound consequences for the privilege of your sexual sin. And the primary proof text that I've chosen for these episodes is taken from Galatians chapter 6, verses 7, 8, and 9, which says this: "Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. The one who sows to please his sinful nature, from that nature will reap destruction. The one who sows to please the Spirit, from the Spirit will reap eternal life. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." Praise be to God for the reading of His holy word. And from that scripture, I've extrapolated 13 principles that I want to share with you concerning this concept of the deception of sexual sin. And the first principle I'm kind of throwing in for free, really just almost in the way of introduction. So my first principle is simply this: every commodity has corresponding benefits and cost. And again, principle 1 is this: every commodity has corresponding benefits and costs. And I think this is obviously true of virtually any commodity that you would ever purchase or be interested in. For example, if you were going to buy a car, the car might be $23,000. So, in other words, if you want the car, it's going to cost you something. But it's true that you will derive great benefits from owning this car, right? It's going to enable you to go from point A to point B. You can drive to work every day. You can get around. You can travel in comfort. If it's a nice car, maybe it has leather seats, heated seats. It's got a nice sound system. So there's great benefits to owning this car, but there's also going to be a cost. Well, that's true of virtually any commodity. I think I shared an illustration one time. If you go into Walmart and let's say that you see a lamp that you like and you happen to need a lamp for your desk at home, and you notice this lamp and you think, wow, that lamp would look really nice on my desk. Well, if you like the commodity, you appreciate the benefits that you would derive from the commodity. You can't just pick it up because you like it and walk out the door at Walmart, because first you got to go past the cash register, right? So the lamp has a thing on it that's called a price tag. So you look at the price, and let's say this particular lamp is $59. So now you have a decision to make. Are the benefits that I'm going to derive from owning this lamp, if I take this commodity into my life, do the benefits outweigh the cost? And if you decide that you want the benefits bad enough, then you're willing to pay the price. You're willing to pay the cost. So you go to the cash register and you pay the cost. You pay $59 plus tax. You take the lamp home, and now you can enjoy the benefits. So every commodity in life has corresponding benefits and cost. And for our purpose here in the Power of Purity podcast, I want to use this as a template that we lay over the concept of sexual sin, the indulgence of sexual sin, or acting out sexually, or expressing our sexual gift in a way that's inconsistent with God's will, plan, and design for our life, or in a way that's in disobedience to God. In other words, I'm suggesting that sexual sin, in a sense, is a kind of commodity. You want this in your life. You want to do this. You want to look at porn. Maybe you want to have an affair. Maybe you want to have cyber sex on the internet. Maybe you want to get a sexualized massage. Maybe you want to go to a strip club. However it is that you're tempted to act out, well, that's a kind of commodity, right? In that moment, it's something that you want in your life. In the same way, you might come to the place where you decide, I want a new car, or I want a lamp for my desk. I want to enjoy the indulgence of sexual sin. Well, guys, the point being, every commodity has corresponding benefits and cost. So it is true that you will derive, I will derive, if I choose to do this, certain benefits from the indulgence of sexual sin, but we can't be deceived. As our proof text says, do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man will reap what he sows. So while it's true there are benefits to the commodity, there will also be corresponding costs. And a wise man learns to weigh the benefits and the costs together at the same time. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We're going to unpack this thing as we go. But in the way of maybe a final metaphor for this first point, every commodity has corresponding benefits and cost. I'm picturing in my mind's eye right now just the concept of a seesaw or a teeter-totter. And you know the fulcrum is in the middle, right? So if a kid sits on either end, then the kid on one side of the seesaw can push himself up, and as he goes up, the other kid goes down. And then that kid can push himself up, and as he goes up, the other kid goes down. So we see this rhythm up and down, up and down. So this idea that every commodity has benefits and cost, I'm picturing, if you'll see this seesaw, and on one side are the benefits, and on the other side are the cost. And I think if we're a wise man, we will consider the possibility of evaluating and weighing the benefits versus the cost, really in virtually any buying decision we would ever make, but specifically in application to this concept of sexual sin. And what we're going to learn, guys, basically is that if the benefits of a particular decision outweigh the cost, then it's probably a pretty good investment. So you might decide to go ahead and buy that car or buy that lamp or participate in this activity because I'm going to get more out of it than what it's going to cost me. But on the other hand, if you evaluate it and you realize, oh my gosh, the cost is way greater than the benefits that I'm going to derive, then it's not a good investment. But one way or the other, by being able to evaluate the benefits and the costs side by side, it brings wisdom, it brings light, and it's going to help you make an educated decision based upon the information as to whether or not you want this particular commodity in your life. So our first principle is simply this: every commodity has corresponding benefits and cost. And in view of that, I want to talk a little bit about each side of the seesaw for a minute, the benefits and then the cost. So that brings me to my second principle of the deception of sexual sin. Principle 2 is this: every commodity has a corresponding benefit. It's just true, and I'd suggest that typically the very reason that you're interested in purchasing any particular commodity is because of the corresponding benefits that you're going to enjoy as a result of purchasing or participating with that particular commodity. And you may have heard me talk about before, but I used to own a remodeling company that was called St. Louis Siding and Window Company. And in this company, we did all kinds of basic home remodeling projects. We did maintenance-free siding and windows, entry doors, garage doors. We did some roofing. We did guttering. We did kitchen cabinet refacing, some new kitchens and baths, and all kinds of basic home remodeling projects. But when we'd call on a prospective client to give them a presentation and then to make a bid on a particular job, we'd often attempt to close the sale, of course, make the sale if we could, and we do this by creating a sense of value for the prospect by using what's really a pretty familiar sales technique where we would help the client evaluate the cost versus the benefits to this particular home remodeling project. So, for example, let's say that a particular client was interested maybe in new thermal windows for the house, and so we measure up the windows, and the bid comes to $4,000. So if you want new windows for your house, these new thermal windows, it's going to cost you something, $4,000. But let's consider for a moment the benefits you're going to enjoy if you have the new windows installed on your home. And it's actually been a long time, guys, since I sold windows, but I very quickly just scratched here on my notes the benefits that I could remember, and I quickly came up with 11 different benefits to getting new windows for your house. Number one, they're maintenance-free, which means you're never going to have to paint or caulk your windows again. Number two, they tilt in for cleaning, which is totally awesome because it means you're never going to have to go outside your house again to clean your windows. You're never going to have to get step ladders out to clean your windows. And you're going to be able to clean your windows in a fraction of the time that it used to take you because these windows tilt in for cleaning. Number three, the new windows are going to add significant value to your home, which means that when you go to sell your house, typically you get a large portion of the investment back at the point of resale because the average buyer is probably willing to pay a little bit more for a house that has new thermal windows than the house down the street they're looking at that doesn't have new thermal windows. Point number four, the new windows are going to make your house more saleable, which means that when you go to sell your house, if there happens to be several houses in your area that are for sale, but those houses do not have new windows, but your house does have new windows, it's probably going to be a pretty good sales point that when prospects come and they're looking at these different houses, they're going to say, well, wow, this one has the new windows. That's a pretty nice feature. So it's going to make your house more saleable. The fifth point is that the new windows are going to lower your utility bills. And that's a pretty big deal because the fact is the two biggest areas of energy loss in an average home are the attic and the windows. So for the average house to replace the old drafty windows with new thermal windows is going to make a substantial difference on the energy efficiency of the home and therefore the utility bills that you get every month. The sixth benefit to the new windows is they add curb appeal to your home just because they're beautiful and they look brand new and they never have to be painted, so they do add an aesthetic value to your house and they make your house more presentable and more beautiful from the exterior and the interior. Benefit number 7 is they make the house quieter, which means it won't be nearly as noticeable when the kids in the neighborhood are yelling or screaming up and down the block, or your neighbors mowing the grass down the street. Your house is going to be quieter. Benefit number 8 is ease of operation, which means that you can actually easily operate your windows when you want to open them, and you're not going to have to fight them to try to get them open the way you have to fight your old windows. And when you do get them open, you're not going to have to prop them open with a paint stick or something because they won't even stay up by themselves. They'll go up, they'll go down, very easy, ease of operation, and that's a great benefit. Benefit number 9, they eliminate condensation, or they at least dramatically reduce condensation, which means that on really, really cold days outside, you don't have to put towels on your windowsills to soak up all the water that's condensating and running down on the interior of the windows. Benefit number 10, they make your house more comfortable, which means it's cooler in the summer because the cool air that your air conditioner is blowing into the house actually stays in the house instead of going through the old drafty windows. And in the winter, your house is going to be warmer because the warm air that your system is putting in the house is going to stay in the house. And that means you can sit on your couch in January watching TV and you don't even have to get a blanket and put it around yourself so you can stay warm in your own house. So the windows are going to make your house more comfortable. And then benefit number 11, the new windows are going to add life to your heating and cooling system. And the reason for this is because when your air conditioner blows cool air into your house, the cool air is going to stay in your house a lot longer because it's not escaping through your old drafty windows, which means the thermostat isn't going to have to kick on and kick off nearly as much to tell your air conditioner, hey, give me more cool air up here because it's getting too warm in the house. So the heating system and cooling system is actually going to cycle much less because your house is more energy efficient, and that means that it's going to add life to your heating and cooling system. So I think you guys get the point. So after reviewing this list of benefits with a prospective client, it makes it far easier for that client to evaluate the cost of the new windows. It is true there's a cost. It's going to cost you $4,000, but look at all the benefits that you're going to derive by making this decision to put new windows in your house. So when you do this seesaw thing and you actually set the benefits next to the cost side by side, it helps a person bring clarity to the decision they have to make, and it helps them make a quality decision accordingly. And as I said previously, in such a case, if the benefits outweigh the cost, then the prospect can easily justify to themselves why they should go ahead and make this decision, so they might decide to buy the windows. But if they feel that the cost outweighs the benefits, then for them it's not a very good investment, and they probably will decide to not make that decision at this time. And by the way, as I mentioned earlier, I'd advocate that this principle of benefits versus cost applies to virtually every decision that you're ever going to make in your life. So, for example, should I buy a new car? Should I go back to college and finish my degree? Well, guess what? There's going to be great benefits to your life if you do that. You will no doubt derive benefits if you get your college degree. But it's also going to cost you something if you decide to go back to college to get your degree. So you've got to evaluate these benefits and costs side by side. Should we have another child? Well, there's going to be benefits and there's going to be cost. Should you stay home from church today and sleep in? Should you go to the family reunion this summer in Colorado? Should you start a monthly savings plan now in view of your upcoming retirement? Should you go to the marriage conference that your church is hosting next month? Should you plant a garden in the backyard this spring? You see, if you plant a garden, no doubt you would derive some great benefits, but it's also going to cost you something. So we have to evaluate the benefits against the cost of any particular decision. And so on it goes, and this principle applies to our life probably far more than we really realize. Because I'd advocate that virtually every decision we make can be framed by the benefits that we would derive and what it's going to cost us. Or said another way, the advantages and the disadvantages to any particular decision that we have to make, or maybe said another way, reasons that I should make this decision versus reasons that I should not make this decision to buy this certain thing or to do this certain thing. And with that being said, it brings me to the third principle, and remember that I've got 13 principles here that I'm going to share with you concerning the deception of sexual sin, and this is principle 3, and somebody might be surprised at this third principle, but I just think it's honest, and I think it's fair, so I want to acknowledge it, and that is principle 3, you will enjoy certain benefits as a result of your sexual sin. Or said another way, when we choose to express our sexual gift in a way that's inconsistent with God's will for our life, or to say, when we choose to express our sexual gift in disobedience to God or in a sinful way, I'd advocate that we will derive certain benefits as a result of participating in this sexual sin. And I think that this really goes without saying, because why else would we even be tempted to act out in a sexual way or in sexual disobedience if it didn't do something for us? Apparently, we're achieving some perceived value or some real value, some sense of enjoyment or pleasure or delight or fulfillment or gratification by participating in this particular sexual sin, or else why would I even be tempted to do this thing? And why would this thing hold so much allure and so much power over me if I couldn't, in fact, derive some kind of benefit or pleasure by participating? And by the way, don't ask me how or why the world seems to work this way, but it seems like it really does so often, that the things that are really bad for you taste really good or feel really good, and the things that are really good for you don't necessarily taste really good or feel really good. So, for example, things like ice cream and donuts and candy and soda and butter and fast food can taste really, really good, but in reality, they're really, really bad for you. And things like broccoli and cauliflower and Brussels sprouts and spinach and liver and tofu don't necessarily taste really, really good, but in reality, they're really, really good for you. And in the way of another example, it can feel really good to overeat and stuff yourself and then lay on the couch and take a nap. But that's a really bad thing for you to do. And it can feel like a really hard thing to do to control your eating habits and to eat in moderation, and then to take a walk around the block after you eat or go to the gym and work out. Even though that'd be a really good thing for you to do, it feels like a really hard thing to do. So guys, in much the same way, I'd suggest that when we choose to disobey God with the expression of our sexuality, and we choose to act out sexually in some way, it can actually feel really, really good at the moment, even though we're doing something that's really, really bad for us. So sometimes, or probably better said, maybe most of the time, it actually feels really good to look at porn. It feels really good to get aroused. It feels really good to have a sexual experience, even if it's just with myself. Or it can feel really good to have a sexualized massage, or to use a prostitute, or to have an affair, or to call a 1-900 phone number, or to have cyber sex, But the fact that these things feel really good in the moment doesn't change the reality that they're actually really, really bad for you in the long run. And that's why we need to learn this skill of being able to evaluate the benefits versus the cost side by side. So it empowers us to evaluate all the information and then make a quality, objective decision accordingly. And by the way, I'm going to talk about that more in a little bit. Right now, we're talking about the reality that every commodity does have benefits, even the commodity of sexual sin. It seems to have benefits that we can enjoy. There's a pleasure to be gained. But just hold on, because we're going to move forward in the presentation, and we're going to come to the reality that every commodity also has cost. But right now we're talking about the benefits of sexual sin, or at least the perceived benefits of sexual sin. And in the way of proof text, I have a couple that I'd share with you here. The first one is found in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 25, where the Bible acknowledges that there's pleasure in sin for a season. In speaking of Moses, it says, "He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin." And then it's interesting to note that when speaking of the original temptation of Eve in the Garden of Eden, it says in Genesis chapter 3, verse 6, "When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some of it and she ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it." So I just would like to observe that in this scripture, there's three very interesting words here. The words good, pleasing, and desirable. Right? This thing that she was about to do was seismic in its implications, like an atomic bomb going off for humanity. So you think that when she looked at it would be horrible and terrible and evil and repulsive. But it says that when she looked at the fruit on the tree, it was good for food, and it was pleasing to the eye, and it was desirable for gaining wisdom. The Message version of the Bible quotes Genesis 3:6 this way, "When the woman saw that the tree looked like good eating and realized what she would get out of it, that she'd know everything, she took and ate the fruit and then gave some to her husband, and he ate the fruit." So isn't it interesting that something that turned out to be so terrible and had horrible consequences, not only for Adam and Eve, but for all of humanity, that it appeared to be so pleasing in that moment of temptation? And then another scripture, 1 John chapter 2, verse 6, I just think is interesting. It says, "For everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life comes not from the Father, but from the world." And again, I think this verse implies something about the allure and the potential pleasure and fulfillment or sense of satisfaction that we might derive from participating in some sinful thing in disobedience to God. The lust of the flesh implies a kind of satisfaction when you feed that lust. It's as if your flesh has this tremendous, horrible itch, and you want to scratch it so bad. And when you finally scratch it, you give in to the temptation, to the lust of the flesh, and you scratch it, you do this thing, and you feel this great sense of relief and satisfaction for a moment. Or maybe a metaphor of thirst would be good here. Imagine that your flesh is really thirsty for something, just you're dying of thirst. You want this so bad. So when you participate in this activity to fulfill this thirst that you have, this lust of the flesh, your flesh quite naturally feels this sense of satisfaction or fulfillment, because in that moment your flesh is getting the very thing that it wants so desperately. or your eye is getting the thing that it sees that it wants so desperately. And there's this sense of achievement and fulfillment, the pride of life, this arrogance that we're getting the thing that we want and we feel entitled. So we're going to give ourselves the indulgence of this pleasure of this thing that we want. So I have no doubt, you guys, that there is a reality that we do receive and enjoy certain benefits in the moment that we indulge ourselves in sexual sin and disobedience to God. And what are these benefits? Well, I don't know for sure, but maybe it's things like this. When we participate in sexual sin, there's the pleasure of these wonderful and passionate and euphoric feelings and sensations. And there's the intense and powerful and overwhelming and explosive sensation of the orgasm itself. And then there's the explosion of these feel-good neurochemicals like dopamine and endorphins and oxytocin and serotonin that are released in massive doses in our brain and our body through sexual activity and then orgasm. Or in the verbiage of 1 John chapter 2, verse 6, maybe the flesh is feeling great pleasure when its lust is being scratched. Maybe the eyes are feeling great pleasure when they get to see something in fulfillment of the lust that lives within them. And maybe there's a sense in which the pride of life is fulfilled when a person accomplishes this exploit that they've so passionately lusted after. So with all that being said, you guys, we do have to acknowledge that there is pleasure in sin for a season. There is a sense in which every commodity has benefits and cost, and I'd advocate that even the commodity of sexual sin seems to give us certain benefits. There's certain pleasures that we derive from that. But with that being said, you guys, we cannot be deceived. And although it's true that in a very real way there are certain benefits associated with the pleasures of sexual sin, we have to realize that there's also tremendous cost associated with these same benefits. And that's what the thesis of this episode gets to when it says, you will pay profound consequences for the privilege of your sexual sin. Wouldn't it be nice if we could say when it comes to sexual sin, oh, there's only benefits. There's no cost. All you get is benefits. That'd be really nice. But as we're going to see as we proceed through our principles here, it isn't true. And the reality is that there is great cost to sexual sin. And therefore, if we choose to avail ourselves to the benefits of sexual sin, we will also automatically and inevitably avail ourselves to the associated cost of said sexual sin. So, is there pleasure in sexual sin? Can we derive a sense of benefit from participating in sexual sins and disobedience to God? Yes. But is there also a great price to be paid in exchange for the benefits that we enjoy as a result of participating in said sexual sin? Yes. And with that being said, you guys, I see from the clock that I'm overdue for this episode, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. I've said that I have 13 principles that we're going to cover here concerning the deception of sexual sin, and we've now covered the first 3 principles, which were this. Number 1, every commodity has corresponding benefits and cost. Principle 2, every commodity has a corresponding benefit. And principle 3, you will enjoy certain benefits as a result of your sexual sin. And with that being said, if you're interested in hearing principles 4 through 13, please come back and be with me next week on the Power of Purity podcast as we continue this series called The Deception of Sexual Sin. And with that being said, you guys, God bless you. Have an awesome week. Have a blessed week. And I pray that you will be blessed as you continue your pursuit of God and your pursuit of sexual purity. God bless you guys, and have an awesome day.
Thanks for listening. Visit powerofpurity.org for more resources and information. And if this podcast has been helpful or encouraging, please invite a friend to listen. Until next time, remember, there's power in purity.